Now, kind of back to kind of what is going on. Section one kind of gives you a very brief overview of the scenario and the state of the world as it exists now. Basically, in a nutshell, the year is 2037. Um, the world has been racked by series after series of environmental disasters, rendering most of the landscape around the world unlivable, and so populations have tended to gather and cluster in large megacities, of which Los Angeles is one of these locations. In current day, Los Angeles can actually consist of the section of California from Los Angeles all the way as far north as San Francisco and as far south as San Diego. So it is a very large amount of territory. However, also, which is important, back in the early 2000s, and actually I think even a little bit before that, um, humanity started to actually colonize space. So there's actually moon colonies and a number of different colonies throughout the solar system. And a lot of people have traveled up there for greener pastures, so to speak. But typically, they are only looking for someone that has a very specific set of skills, or someone with a industrial background, or potentially a lot of money and social connections. So it is very difficult for your average denizen to get up into the colonies or space unless you're really willing to work essentially as an indentured servant. A lot of the colonization, construction, and as well as conflicts actually in the past has been done by Nexus replicants. Nexus 6 replicants were replicants that were designed with a 4-year lifespan that would build space stations, terraform. They also fought wars and conflicts up in space. So if you kind of roll through this section, it kind of gives you an idea of what's going on with the megacorps, the megacities, and all that. So, but then in terms of timeline, I'm gonna poke this out. So this gives you a very kind of a brief timeline starting from the 1980s. So 1980s, the ecosystem collapses, governments fall, UN becomes the only real functioning government body, megacities and megacorps rise. Late 1900s, off-world emigration. 2000s, Tyrell Corporation introduces the Nexus androids, all the way from Series 1 through Series 8, so the Nexus 1 through Nexus 8 replicants. So in the late 2000s, the Reptitech unit and Blade Runners was formed mostly as to control replicants, replicants that would disobey orders or potentially go rogue and cause issues. Early 2010s, the Nexus 6 becomes the dominant replicant style. Most and a lot of people at this point have moved off world. Back also in the 2000s, there was a number of incidents with replicants rebelling, and that's when a couple of different movements have started to develop on Earth. One is human supremacists, as well as replicant sympathizers, and so there's a couple different factions. 2019 is the year that the Blade Runner movie takes place in, and that is a group of replicants from smuggle themselves back to Earth and end up in conflict and ended up murdering Eldon Tyrell, who was the chief architect of the Nexus program, as well as the CEO of Tyrell Corporation. After that, the Nexus 8s came out, which were intended to be, um, uh, a replacement for the Nexus 6s, but were supposed to be more controllable. But actually, what ended up happening is a database leak of all the replicant identities um, made replicant hunting essentially happen. So the human supremacists were hunting Nexus 8s on Earth, and so the Nexus 8s both organized and tried and also went into hiding. And then in 2022, there was a incident called the Blackout, and the Blackout is a complete and total blackout of essentially of the entire West Coast. And during the time of the blackout, there was also a coordinated attack on essentially worldwide on all the major data centers in the world, and which attempted to wipe out, essentially destroyed all those databases. The result of which was they destroyed the identities and the database of all the Nexus 8 replicant identities. So 2023, UN declares replicants illegal, so they stopped building them. The Rep Detect unit is primarily tasked at that point for hunting down any Nexus 8 replicants. Then things start to get back to normal, except during that time frame, Tyrell Corporation has essentially gone bankrupt and fallen apart. In that wake, the Wallace Corporation kind of rose to prominence through both its charismatic and very intelligent leader, there's Wallace Corporation, who reintroduced replicants into the world, into the large, and now replicants are used industrial as it's essentially industrial mules. They take care of any kind of hard, dangerous labor, as well as, but they are also now have been integrated into the LAPD and the Rep Detect unit, of which you are part of. And so, just about a year ago, prior in 2036, the UN repealed the replicant prohibition, and supposedly that happened because the Nexus 9s are supposedly incapable of lying or harming humans of its own accord. So we will see how that works. However, just be aware that replicants are kind of second-class citizens with limited rights, and so one of the tasks of the Rep Detect unit is to investigate replicants who are accused of anomalous behavior, harming another human, and potentially be retired by a Blade Runner. So there's a couple other things in there. Kind of taking a read. And then sections 5 and 6 in here kind of walk you through a little bit more history of the environment of LA, as well as some of the various factions in the world, government agencies, media, criminal organizations, Wallace Corporation, which has a tendency to dominate LA as such. Again, a little bit of reading. Any questions, feel free to ask. And if there's any information that I believe that you would know, and I will be free in sharing that with you. So don't feel obligated to have everything memorized or that you need to know everything. I will help you guys out and kind of try to not lead you astray. So thank you and good night.